Donald Trump's tariff deadline has come and gone, and with no deal or extension in sight, taxes on Canadian goods will now increase to 35%. Drew Fagan from the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy joins us now to break down where the country goes from here. Drew, great to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Miranda.
All right, so can you break down what exactly happened with these negotiations? Where was the lapse here?
So I'm not the issue of whether it's a lapse or not is a really interesting one. At one level, yes, the president has increased tariffs on some Canadian goods in the context of putting new tariffs on dozens, 92 countries around the world. And interestingly, Canada's the only country to which the tariffs are being applied as of midnight last night. Everybody else has till August 7th to adjust. So that's significant. So what was driving the president? It's always hard to know what's driving the president. It might have been something to do with Canadian recognition, intention to recognize the state of Palestine in the fall. The rationale in the press release, in the letter, was the supposed problem with regard to fentanyl exports to the United States from Canada, shipments to the United States, which have been proven to be marginal. It's a golden oldie. It's always hard to get into the president's head, but we are where we are.
Well, it's hard to not feel like Canada is being targeted. There's only 5 other countries that have higher rates than ours. Drew, what do you think are the odds we're still going to see a deal come to fruition?
So it's a great point that the headline number 35% is very high. But let me, sort of take that apart a little bit and kind of note that the president, with regard to Canada, his bark is worse than his bite. And I hesitate to say that because it can always change. But the fundamental point is that the free trade agreement with the United States continues to hold the tariffs, and the headline number of 35% apply to only those goods shipped into the United States that don't qualify under CUSMA, the new NAFTA. And that's a very small percentage of our goods, as little as 4 or 5%. Everything else, by and large, is still going in tariff-free. So although the headline number is 35%, the average tariff is only about 4 or 5%. It's actually lower than any other country in the world. For us, because we have a free trade agreement, and the United States has very few free trade agreements. The one with us and Mexico is really the only one that matters to the United States. For us, this negotiation is important, but it's not the main event. What's going to be the main event is next year when we renegotiate CUSMA. That was always the intent. That's in the original agreement in 2018 and 2019. And that's possibly when push could come to shove with the United States. We'll see what happens.
All right, well, Drew, what do you think about Mark Carney? I mean, our prime minister basically built his political platform on being the right man to negotiate with Donald Trump, but, with no deal in hand, how much pressure do you think Carney is under right now?
I think that publicly, he has a challenge because the sensitivity with regard to Canadians and the United States right now is so high because of the rhetoric about 51st state and annexation and manifest destiny, things that go back more than 100 years. So he has to be careful in political terms. At the same time, he's being very strategic in not going for a bad deal, I think, and focusing on what's to come. And the reality is the business community is concerned about what might happen, but is not as concerned about what's happening now for the reasons that I just explained. So he's actually under less pressure behind the scenes than it might appear because the economy is still relatively stable and the impact of what's going on is smaller, much smaller than we had feared, which doesn't mean that relations with the United States are on a great path right now, but there's still time to kind of rebalance and focus on those negotiations next year, as well as other things that are fundamental to the bilateral relationship, like increased defense spending.
All right, Drew, do you think these tariffs are actually working for the U.S., or do you think this is just a classic case of good politics, bad policy?
So President Trump has upended, if you like, decades of choreography of global trade. Typically, what was done, and it took time, is that all countries sat around, a big table, literally, figuratively, and work things out. The US was always the big dog, but it seldom went for zero sum outcomes. What the president is doing here is going for multiple zero sum outcomes, not worrying about what the overall effect will be on bilateral relations. Many people think that's, kind of penny wise, pound foolish, cutting off your nose to spite your face, whatever you like, and that eventually the tariffs are going to hit with regard to slower growth and higher inflation. So far, we have seen some of that in the United States, but not enough to have a political impact. Whether we will see more in future, particularly after what has been done overnight and markets are down, time will tell.
All right, that is Drew Fagan from the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Drew, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Miranda.